Apple's reputation of never changing the iPhone design is becoming less of a reputation and more of a reality. If you have an iPhone 15, you might have seen this message appear. What does this mean for Apple? Well, I've split this video into 3 different categories, each one a significant part of the iPhone, and the last one I'm calling the Apple trend. The iPhone cameras have now got their own reputation of being really great at video, and this has been constantly improving over the years. If we look back and look at the first iPhone, for example, those phones didn't even have video, they only had the photo option. And now we've come all the way to having night mode shots and a bunch of different cool features. And you might think cameras aren't that innovative, but there are so many different aspects of cameras that can be upgraded. You can upgrade the amount of megapixels that it has, or increase the low light performance, like the iPhone 14 Pro. There's definitely still room for innovation on iPhones. For example, Google, although it's mainly software based, they do have their features like Face Unblur, which is definitely something that iPhone doesn't have yet, although I can see Apple bringing this in the future. But Apple does have things like cinematic mode, which is on other phones, but Apple's done it quite well. But this brings up a whole nother question. Does software innovation count? No matter how good the hardware is on a phone, it's got to have good software. iOS, although some people hate it, majority love it, which helps this phone do really, really well. The iPhones do have a really good display, although it's not something that everyone notices. There are lots of different sectors or sections within displays that Apple can improve on. For example, the brightness. Recently, on the iPhone 15s, they can now go up to 2000 nits peak brightness, which is double that of what the iPhone 14 Pros had. Not just that, but Apple can improve their refresh rates, like the iPhone 13 Pro, which was the first to have 120Hz. Although this is still on the Pro iPhones and not yet on the baseline iPhones. Something that is on all the baseline iPhones is having an OLED display, which was introduced on the iPhone 10. So what can Apple do in the future to innovate their displays? Well, they can improve it so that the baseline iPhones have similar to what the Pro iPhones have. They could have no notch for once. They could reduce the bezels on the phone. They can increase the screen size while still having the same form factor, like the iPhone 12 compared to the iPhone 8. Now, before we talk about my theory about the Apple trend, let's talk about processors. And now, don't skip ahead, there's a lot more to it than you think. I'm sure you know that Apple creates their own silicon chips, and the iPhone 15 Pro now has the A17 Pro. And there are different sections within the processor that helps this phone have even more features that aren't just on the inside, especially the USB controller. Now, having this new USB controller allows for the phone to have faster USB-C speeds, which is definitely something we've been waiting for a really long time on the iPhone 15 Pros. Something that Apple promised in their September event is that we will have much better graphics when it comes to games. Having console-level games on the iPhone. We'll still have to wait to see if that's true. Okay, let's move on to the Apple trend. Other tech YouTubers and websites may refer to Apple doing things the Apple way. And what I'm calling the Apple trend is basically looking at the history of iPhones, of changes, both minor and major, and basically forecasting what's going to come for the current tech world. Now let's look into this. I would say there's basically 2 ends to the spectrum. One end being copying, and the other being perfect innovation, or what you might want to call the Apple way. Let's start on the more obvious side, copying. Now, Apple is known for copying things, but that is only because they do it the Apple way, and they're not the only ones that do this. For example, when they removed their headphone jack, Samsung and basically every other company copied them afterwards. Same with the power brick in the iPhone box. When looking at the Apple trend for copying, Apple will consider 3 things. Number 1, will the feature still be good in the future? Number 2, practicality. Is this an actually good feature, or is it just a waste of resources? And number 3, Apple's probably favorite, income. Will it generate enough money? This is something we can clearly see from the Apple trend, having different features that Apple brings in later after they've met those 3 criteria. For example, wireless charging, or even OLED displays or an electric stylus. Now, it may seem that I'm just naming features, but don't think that. It's just that these features, when they first came out, were still new. For example, Face ID, when it came out in 2017, was quite a big thing. However, at this point, they're just something you'd expect, but they've all been done the Apple way. Now, moving on to the other end of the spectrum, we've got innovation. Now, innovation isn't the first word that comes to mind when you think of newer iPhones. Maybe with the original when they had all these big updates, but now it seems like they're trailing off. However, this is where we can see the Apple trend. There are many features, mainly software-based, that Apple introduced first. For example, one you probably didn't know is that Apple was the first to have the App Store. It wasn't Play Store first. Another thing that Apple released, and it's still sort of exclusive to them, is the Retina display, which is basically a display that has a higher concentration of pixels than the human eye can see, which means you can't see the individual pixels at a normal viewing distance. And I'm sure you knew this was coming, but I've got to bring up the Vision Pro. Although that may seem like, oh, we've already got VR and AR headsets, this is supposedly going to be a next level AR headset, as the pass-through is absolutely amazing and the eye tracking is something that Apple has brought themselves. And then there's the ecosystem, having all these amazing features like using your iPad as an external display or universal control. All of these definitely make you more trapped into Apple's ecosystem and make you feel like they're innovating when sometimes they are just copying. Before you click off now, if you're still here, just listen to this last little paragraph. So Apple has not really released anything apart from the Vision Pro that's super innovative and brand new. And they are moving more and more towards subscription-based services, like forcing you to have iCloud, having the Apple One package, having Apple News, Apple Arcade, Apple Fitness, and the list goes on. My point is, subscription-based services aren't something that you unsubscribe from, and it gives Apple this constant revenue of money, as they know you're not going to be upgrading your phone, because they're going to be more and more similar over the years, and they'll be lasting longer and longer. Therefore, I want to say Apple is running out of ideas when it comes to the iPhone, and possibly even other devices. But you know what isn't running out of ideas? This channel. So consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.